Well, good afternoon, everyone. Hello and welcome to Just Us Live, Just Leadership's bi-weekly Facebook Live discussion series. My name is Teresa Hodge. I'm the co-founder and chief customer officer at R3 Score Technologies. Just Leadership is dedicated to decarcerating the United States by educating, elevating, and empowering the people and communities most impacted by systemic racism to drive, amplify, and sustain the kinds of policy reform that builds thriving, sustainable, and healthy communities. In June, at Just Leadership, we launched the Just Us campaign, a nationwide call for policymakers to decarcerate the United States by immediately adopting federal and state-based policy recommendations to save the lives of incarcerated people during any type of major crisis or emergency. During natural disasters and through the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen that the lives of people behind bars are threatened as disposable. Today, we are highlighting the experiences of formerly incarcerated women. I am so excited to be joined here today by Charlotte Garns. She is the operations manager at the Bail Project. Kandra Clark, who's the vice president of policy and strategy at Exodus Transitional Communities. Marilyn Nguyen, executive director at Women on the Rise. Ladies, if we just take a few moments and introduce ourselves, and we're going to start with Charlotte. We'll go to you, Kandra, and then to Marilyn. If you can just greet everyone and just let us know who you are and some of the things you're doing, and we'll get into our discussion.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Charlotte Garns. I am the operations manager with the Bail Project. I am a Just Leadership Leading with Conviction 2020 cohort graduate as of Saturday. And currently, yes, I had to get that plug in. And currently I am doing work in the city of Savannah and also, I'll say different counties here in South Georgia with assisting with bail and not only that, in employment, workforce development. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Kandra.
My name is Kandra Clark. I'm the Vice President of Policy and Strategy with Exodus Transitional Community. We're a preventative reentry and advocacy organization. I also am on the board of the Women's Community Justice Association and was a 2018 Leading with Conviction graduate. And I do a lot of my work out here in New York City, specifically to end mass incarceration and transform our systems.
All right.
And Marilyn.
All right, and good afternoon, everyone, and I'm so happy to be a part of this discussion. I am Marilyn Nguyen. I'm the Executive Director of Women on the Rise, and Women on the Rise is an organization that is led by formerly incarcerated women of color. I am also a Just Leadership graduate of 2016, and I am also one of the co-chairs of the ACDC task force to close the Atlanta City Detention Center. And I'm formerly incarcerated.
Okay, so again, thank you guys for coming and being open and willing to share your experiences of what it's like to be a woman who experienced our legal system. I know that Charlotte and I serve federal prison sentence, and Marilyn and Kandra serve state prison sentences, and there is a huge difference, and perhaps throughout some of the conversations, you're going to hear some of those differences. But for Charlotte, you and I have something in common. We both went to prison a little bit later in life as women who had a professional career. And so if you could just take a minute and talk about how you believe that impacted or that was a different experience for you as a person who went to prison a little bit later in life with good skill sets.
Again, I am Charlotte Garns. I did, I can't remember the age, it was just recently, and then I'm aging myself, but I received a 60 months federal prison sentence. And I started serving that time in in June of 2013. And entering prison, prior to prison, I was a licensed mental health professional. I was a licensed professional counselor. So entering into prison, for some reason, the concept or the notion of the federal government or the federal prison systems take care of you is so out of the window. Is not the case. But entering in, what I found was limited resources and limited things available for someone who's within the system to truly work to improve themselves, limited books, limited resources, limited resources as far as in education and those different components. Having the professional mental health background, it did awaken and open my eyes to realize like the system is not set up to assist people with true rehabilitation if they have mental health issues. Medication, for example, medication for people who have mental health issues were blanketed. And what I mean by that is the fact that if a person came in with depression, they received the same medication as the next person who may have bipolar. No services was available for us if we had depression or we experienced loss or anything of that nature. So the skill set that I had, I felt some of it was somewhat lost in because I wasn't able to continue building up on the skill set mentally and educationally.
Got it. So. Understand that. So when you came home from prison, which out of all of us, I think you're the person who recently experienced incarceration. You came home in what, 2017? 2017,
yes, April of 2017.
Okay, so you've been home for about 3 years. How have you been able to repurpose some of those skill sets? Well, two-part question. How have you been able to repurpose your skill set, and did you lose your license? Was that a condition or part of your incarceration sentence?
Yes, to answer your latter question, yes, I did lose my license. I was licensed in the state of North Carolina and Virginia. North Carolina revoked my license and Virginia suspended my license. As far as repurposing, while I was incarcerated, I did teach the GED courses to the women. So honing in on those skill set, education has always been important to me. So coming out, as again, right now, I am repurposing myself to continuously educating and training women and individuals coming out of incarceration, and in working with other organizations such as Women on the Rise and different organizations here in Georgia to provide training and advocacy work for individuals coming out to help them repurpose themselves, and also professionals in this movement to better understand what incarceration details and entails for us.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate that. So Kandra and Marilyn, I think I want to ask you both the same question, which is, how are conditions behind the bars harmful for women, in your opinion?
Okay, you
can go, Marilyn.
Okay, I'll go first. And I want to say, first of all, I went to prison at an early age, which turned my life into a downward spiral where I repeated the system constantly. I think I did 6 prison sentences because there was no type of support. There were no type of education. And we used to have this thing about saying, if you did fed time, you did it long, but you did it good. And you state time, you did it hard and you did it short. But I think they're all one and the same. There's nothing there that would enhance your ability to come out and do things for yourself. And rehabilitation is a myth. You have to rehabilitate yourself. The system does not rehabilitate you. And even now with those things, I actually started the Ban the Box campaign here in Atlanta because I knew if I didn't get a job and be able to keep that job, I would spend the rest of my life in prison. And that was all I needed. And I couldn't get that. So right now I'm going into the prison systems also to educate women around how to articulate their backgrounds and their skills that they're experts at inside. So
wonderful. Well, you picked up on the question and the next question. So Kandra, I'm going to ask you the same thing. How is it harmful? And then to add to that is, tell me like some of the things that you're doing now to help other women, because I know that, helping other women is at the centerpiece of a lot of the work that you're doing.
Yeah. So I spent about 10 years in and out of incarceration, addiction, and homelessness from the age of 16 on. And I grew up in domestic violence. So, I always talk about the trauma I experienced before, during, and after incarceration. And I think for women specifically, there's reports that show approximately 90% of women who are incarcerated across the nation suffered sexual or physical abuse as children. So trauma, I think, is definitely at the forefront of a lot of what we're experiencing, again, before, during, and after incarceration. And, so coming home, I had no professional skills. I luckily got an internship at a reentry organization out here in New York City. And in 7 years, I was able to work my way up to an executive position. And one of the groups that I run now is the Women and Girls group. And I'm so blessed that I get to, this is preventative work, right? 14 to 24-year-olds, they haven't been touched by the system yet, but they've experienced trauma based on where they live. Lots of them have lost family members to gun violence, gang violence, or incarceration. A lot of them have parents that are incarcerated. And, running these groups and talking to the women about mental health and trauma and, civic engagement, leadership development, really empowering them and helping form that network for them while they're young so they have access to resources and access to mentors, I think is most important. And, I was just telling Teresa a story the other day around a young woman who came to me who's 25. She has 7-year-old twin daughters that are not living with her. And she was ready to go back to jail because she did not want to go back to the shelter she was living in. So luckily, because we have access to resources and because I have so many connections out here, in a day and a half, I had her moved into a transitional housing unit where her children can come visit her. There's actually an extra for her children, so it's a family residence. So I think kind of tying back all the things that I saw while I was inside, now out here doing this work, it's preventing women from going in, and then the folks who have went in, making sure that we provide them with the resources so that they don't go back.
Wonderful. That's such an incredible story. I'm glad you shared it because when I heard it, it's just so important to see how so many women, when we leave prison, the thing that we want to do is to help other women. And there are limited resources for women in general. So interestingly enough, we talked about how there were limited resources in prison, and yet we've all come home and we've done and are doing some really good and amazing things. So Marilyn, asking you, what do you think is the difference, or, why? You said that you served 6 prison sentences. What was the one thing, or was there a one thing, or how did you get to where you are today?
I actually had a dialogue with the judge. I knew that prison does not rehabilitate. I learned early that prison did not rehabilitate me. I learned that I had to do this on my own, that there was no support for me. And I got arrested and was facing prison for the 7th time. And I had a dialogue in the courtroom with the judge. You keep sending me back to prison. I'm going to come back doing the same thing. I need a job. If I can get a job, I need housing, but I can't have housing if I don't have funds to pay for it. So I would take the job and move in a shelter, but I didn't have to go that route. So we just had that dialogue. I told him about the 18 jobs that I lied to get. I didn't lie to commit crimes. So when I said I had lied and had 18 jobs, I actually had proof of those 18 jobs, which supported him in not sending me back to prison. But he didn't. There was nothing in the city of Atlanta for me. If I wasn't suffering from HIV, or if I wasn't a drug addict, there was no programs. Those were the only programs. So I told another lie. I end up going to and I asked the judge, I said, well, I used to do drugs and I didn't lie about it, but I did used to do drugs. And could I go to accountability court? After he agreed to send me back to prison, he was trying to find some type of resource for me, but there wasn't any. So he ended up sending me to drug court, where I started out with looking for ways that would enhance my life, that I don't have to do this no more, that I don't have to be humiliated or be caged because I can't get a job because of something I did as a kid. So I started Ban the Box here in Atlanta, which led me into doing the work that I do today. And I realized, and I didn't have no idea that I thought that I was the only one. I didn't have no idea that it was so many women, especially women of color, who were suffering from the same trauma and being caged because of color and because of lack of education, because of lack of not knowing your rights. So that started me into this work that I do today. And I believe that if you don't change the law of a situation, then that thing can continue. So is that answering your question?
No, that was actually perfect. One of the things that I heard was you advocated for yourself, that you stood before the judge on the 6th time and you advocated for yourself.
Yeah.
And of course, now you're advocating for other women. So,
advocating for other women.
Yeah.
But can I add one more thing to that?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And when I started this ban the box thing, people were saying, "Oh, you can't do that. You're formerly incarcerated. You're Black. Nobody's going to listen to you." And I had the opportunity of meeting Marie Shaver and another young lady by Cynthia Cameron. And I went to their office. Didn't know anything about nonprofits, organizers, and none of the stuff. But I went in there and they had wrote on the wall that we achieve economic justice for low-income women who are directly impacted by employment discrimination. I said, that's me. But how do I tell these white folks that this is me? And how do I ask for help? I couldn't figure that out. But what I did figure out is I started volunteering there at that organization until I
showed them.
I showed them. I showed them. And I became co-chair of the board of directors of this organization. And that's when the ball got to rolling, when I was able to disclose that I had a background.
Yeah. Well, thank you for adding that last part, because when you advocated for yourself and then you put yourself in a position for people to see you differently. And the moment it sounds like that people saw you differently, other opportunities began to open up. Kandra, question for you is, what are some of the differences you think, or some of the challenges that are different for women than there are for men?
So definitely what I touched on around the trauma, I think is more so with women than men, right? I think a lot of the men do experience trauma too. I think it might be in different ways, right? A lot of women experience trauma at the hands of men. So I think that can kind of be a trigger. I talk about that regularly, spending time on Rikers Island before going upstate and having male officers, watch you while you're going to the bathroom and making derogatory comments to you and potentially, abusing you. And just that constant fear every night, going to bed in my cell, knowing that if an officer was to come in and rape me, there would be nothing I could do about it, I think is more of a reality for women than it is for men. And then also, children. I speak a lot about kind of what changed it for me is when I got upstate, my 8-year-old son had sent me a letter, and the first line of the letter was, "Mom, I am so tired of you being in jail." Mm-hmm. And it kind of, resonated with me in a way that I couldn't keep doing this to him also. So I think the sacrifices that we make for our children, and just us always having kind of our children at the forefront, and not saying that men don't, right? But I think for women, when we come home, our first response is, how do I get my kid back? Where I think with men, sometimes that might not be their first priority. That might not be their top priority. So I think that's different as well.
Yeah. I mean, 100% what you said is something that I feel like most women echo, kind of those sentiments. Charlotte, you were telling us earlier about you being hired for employment, and then later you were let go. Can you share that story with us?
Yes. And first of all, let me thank Ms. Nguyen for everything that she's done for the state of Georgia and within Georgia, because although she's doing her work in Atlanta, it is trickling down to other places.
You're in Savannah, right?
Yes, ma'am. I'm in Savannah.
Okay.
And people tend to forget that Savannah is still a part of Georgia, because a lot of work is being done by Ms. Nguyen and other individuals in Atlanta. So outside of that 285 corridor, like for services. But getting out, it was hard for me to find employment. And I part that with my education and the experience, but I was able to find a position as a workforce development operator. And with that, I had the position for approximately 11 months. And when they found out, or when the company found out that I was directly impacted or formerly incarcerated, they fired me. And not the fact of this was an organization that supposedly was a second chance hiring company. They promoted job fairs for people who are just as involved and things of that nature. Not any of that, but they terminated my contract and they fired me because of my background. And one of the things that I disclosed or I shared was the fact of, I have been with you for 11 months. I have keys to all the offices. I've done, work and different things. So if there was ever an issue, to me, it would have happened or it would have been, displayed by now on the 11th month. But it wasn't the fact of my character speaking for myself or anything of that nature to where they just terminated the contract based on my background.
That's interesting. So we have two stories. Marilyn was able to tell her story of she showed up, volunteered, and did something. And it really just speaks to, in one sense, people with criminal records. It takes someone on the other side to see our humanity and to see us as the people who are standing before them today to extend that opportunity or even to extend grace. Kandra, you talked about how for 5 years you struggled with housing security. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So we passed Ban the Box on employment applications years ago in New York City. And right now we're working on the Ban the Box. It's called the Fair Chance for Housing Act on housing applications. So, when I came home, I got married when I was on Rikers Island too, which is a very, I didn't really know him that well. He was outside. It was a different kind of situation. And when I came home, we were basically strangers. We didn't know each other really before I went in. I'm gone for all these years. Now I'm back and it just was not working. And unfortunately, there was nothing I could do because I didn't have any credit. I didn't have prior references. In New York City, you have to make 10 times what your rent is, right, to even get an apartment. And then having to check that box on the housing application that I'm formerly incarcerated. And I have an extensive record. So even if, a landlord is more likely to look at it and kind of give folks a opportunity if they have 1 or 2 strikes, when you kind of see my record, it's usually a little bit more and cumbersome for them. So it took me 5 years of, couch surfing. I mean, it was not, and I'm working this whole time and going to school the whole time and trying to take care of, my son and my stepkids and all of these different kind of responsibilities. And it was really challenging. So, that's something that we're working on right now in the New York City Council. The bills have been introduced. And we're out there advocating on a daily basis to try to ban the box on the housing applications, as well as increase the vouchers. Another thing that why so many women and so many folks struggle with housing in New York City specifically is the vouchers that they're able to get actually equate to fair market rent rates. So even if you can find a landlord who accepts a voucher, the voucher doesn't actually cover the full month's rent. So you're still trying to figure out how to pay for everything. So there's lots of change that needs to happen within housing. Housing as a right. We should invest in the housing plus model, housing first model. Because we know that folks cannot take their medication if they don't have somewhere to lay their head at night, right? If you have mental illness, you're less likely to take your medication. How can you if you don't have somewhere to live? Lots of young people we see aren't able to actually get back and forth to school if they're in the shelters because of all these, access to housing issues. So in order to really, stabilize folks and provide them with a true second opportunity, investing in a housing first model is definitely important.
Thank you. No, that's good because that shows us, the holistic approach that's necessary in order for us to really help individuals. Now, we know what ban the box means, but that's kind of maybe jargon for someone else. And Marilyn, since you've been working on it longer than the rest of us, do you want to take a stab at explaining what is ban the box? Because we've talked about it on a job application, and now here Kandra's talking about it again on employment application. On housing.
Okay. So ban the box is another barrier that is put up for formerly incarcerated folks where it's a box that's asking you about your history before they even make a decision on what they want to do with you or allow you, or before they even know you. Some people don't even, and it's a box that's asking you about your criminal history, about you before you even get to talk to anyone. So you basically are opt out of housing, or you opt out of employment, or you opt out education. It opts you out of the essential things that you need to thrive in life. And that's what Ban the Box is. And and we work, there are some organizations that is working on banning the box housing here, but here in Atlanta, it's the same way around. If you got a record, you cannot move into an apartment or whatever. But I had back during the time when I was doing Ban the Box, I did go to Habitat. They had the box. I was able to get Habitat to remove that box. So I actually had a house built because I could not rent. So I am sending clients and formerly incarcerated women to Habitat to, if they have a dependent, to get a house built so you don't have to worry about trying to rent from someone.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I know I've told this story often, and I'm a person who, I applied for one job since being home for almost 9 years. And I was fortunate enough that a friend of mine offered me a job before I left prison. So when I left prison, I walked into employment like 10 days or so afterwards. But when I was starting my nonprofit, I was looking for a different job that would be a little bit more flexible. And I applied for a job that a friend of mine called me and said, "Hey, I think this job is perfect for you." It was a job working from my own home, using my own internet, using my own laptop, everything. And I was just going to be doing some back office work for someone. And when I went in, after I put in my basic demographics, name, address, phone number, the question came up, "Have you ever been convicted of a crime?" And I remember it, and I feel like I feel like I'm going to always remember this story, because every time I tell it, it takes me back to that moment. I took a deep breath and I checked the box because I wanted to be honest about where I was and everything. And the screen went black. And I remember, like, literally my eyes, going wide open and pulling back from the screen. And it was just so obvious why I was instantly disqualified for a job that I was overly qualified to do without anything else. It was in that moment that I realized not only will people discriminate against you, so will technology. Yes. And that in their case, if they would have just waited a little longer to ask that question, it would not have been so obvious. But I know for me in that moment, I just made my mind that, okay, I'm going to create my own jobs, my own opportunities, because although I was working, what I recognized was I did not have the emotional courage to go through that type of a cycle of applying for jobs. I have lots of friends who tell the story of how they applied for hundreds of jobs, and like the level of rejection, the amount of ego depletion, on your, how you feel as a person and how you can continue to show up is amazing. So when I see people who are doing really good, who have that made up mind and they're not going back to prison, what I know for sure is it has not been easy, that we've had to overcome so many barriers to get to that place.
And
go ahead.
Something that Kendra said earlier, that's the trauma that we feel constantly, that people don't, that's something that's foreign to so many people, because that constant rejection and that fear of just answering the question that's on the applications for employment and housing, that's the constant trauma that we are reliving day in and day out as someone that's just as involved or directly impacted, that I feel like so many people who don't get to give us grace that you spoke so highly of and Marilyn talked about, that they don't feel or they can never understand, like, this is where we are. And it takes that courage to just check that box and answer those questions.
It does. And not only that, it's bad for your health. I know when I even look at that box, my heart is rushing. I mean, I'm just fearful. It's almost like I want to pass out. Do I check the box and try to, hope that they give me an opportunity, or do I not check this box and get a job? So until they find out. So, but it is, it's traumatizing, and it's really bad on your health as well.
Yeah. And the truth of the matter is, for many people who experience the legal system, are we came in contact with it 5, 10, 20 years ago. No one is who they were 5, 10, 20 years ago. And so it's not seeing people for who they are in this moment. Kandra, you talked a little bit, and I want to go back to this whole voucher program and how it's inadequate and does not address discrimination. Can you kind of pick up on that a little bit?
Sure. So, even with supportive housing or transitional housing, and those are separate kind of from the vouchers are independent housing, right? So I can come home, and we have different voucher programs specifically to New York City, and I'm sure everywhere kind of has their own kind of set of vouchers. And with the independent vouchers, part of the problem is that the landlords automatically correlate them to, you have a substance use issue, you have a mental health issue, you're formerly incarcerated, there's something quote unquote wrong with you, so we don't want you. So there's an even more bias for like private landlords to accept vouchers in the first. And then with the second place, the vouchers aren't fair market rent rate. So right now in New York City, for, I believe it's a 1-bedroom, they give you $1,165. And I think the fair market rent rate out here is closer to like $2,000 for an 1-bedroom, right? Our studios, our rooms go for $1,000 out here. And the voucher for the rooms are only $800. So if you have to come up with that extra money, depending on what it is. And depending on what all your bills are, if you have kids, whatever, the situation is going on, you're not really able to come up with that amount of money. So it's kind of a catch-22. Folks will come home. They'll be so excited because they don't tell you in the prison system that normally you have to stay in a shelter for 18 months before you actually get transitioned out. That you will get a voucher and you'll have to get it renewed the next year because you'll spend that whole year looking for a landlord to take it. You can't find one. So I have folks who've had vouchers for 3 and 5 years and have never found an apartment that they're actually able to use the voucher for. So I think it's also, we design the system. And I'm always saying, one thing that I learned, and this is probably why I really got so passionate about working in this field, is when I was inside, I really realized that the system was not broken, that the system was designed exactly the way it is to keep us exactly where we are, right? And to keep us in those perpetual cycles, whether it's welfare, whether it's the shelter system, whether it's the prison system, all of them are designed like that. And this is just one more base of evidence for that. It's the voucher system. We set up this system of housing out here in New York City, and unfortunately it's not working. Well, it wasn't designed to work, right? Because it's not designed to meet the fair market rent rate. It's not designed to ensure that landlords are not going to discriminate against you and cause stigma against you. And even with the transitional and supportive housing, right now there's about an 18-month waiting list for folks to be able to get into it. I know folks who have stayed in the shelter for 3 years trying to find a supportive or transitional housing that'll accept them, because housing is just a huge crisis in New York City as a whole. So there's a lot of things that we could do too. There's a lot of really innovative things that we could do as far as changing the abatement rules, for example, the tax laws, and creating more affordable housing, giving people the tax credits that actually create 80% affordable housing versus 40% or 20%, right? So there's definitely different ways that we could go about changing the system. But right now it's designed to keep us exactly where we are, cycling in and out.
And I'm sure that everyone would agree that not only in New York, it's probably the same in many of the areas where we live. And, it's when you're a part of the legal system, there are all these collateral consequences. What we're talking about and are highlighting is just a few around employment and housing. Marilyn, you have been threatening to retire for a long time, it feels like. And I've noticed that every year you kind of ramp up a little bit more and more and more. Tell us about the amazing work. As a matter of fact, I was trying to get you to join me on a panel, and you were like, I'm going to be in a parade. The mayor, they're like naming the parade or a street or something after me. So anyway, tell us about the work you're doing in Atlanta right now that you're really passionate about.
Okay, so the work that I'm doing in Atlanta is called Close to Jail ATL, Community Over Cages campaign. And is
Community over cages. I like that. Keep going.
Yeah. And we won legislation last year. The mayor signed legislation to close and repurpose our city jail. It's called Atlanta City Detention Center. And not just close it, repurpose that building or that space into a center for wellness, equity, and freedom for people that have been impacted by the system can actually go to the same location and get services they need. And I visioned that and thought of that because I have went to jail so much, and I'm sitting in jail and I'm looking at people that have lost their houses, their jobs, their kids due to not having enough money to buy a tag decal. Most of the people in this jail are in there for traffic violations. And once you are fingerprinted, mug shot, it's just like receiving a life sentence to these barriers that we face now as formerly incarcerated women. So this building, that it would be repurposed into would be like a one-stop shop. It would be like a city in itself. Everything that a person might imagine that they need, they would be able to find in this building, like 24-hour daycare for women that work night shift, day shift, maybe 2 types of daycares. A daycare for you to come there just to take care of business, and you leave your kid in a daycare while you up on the floor. This is 471,000 square feet, 14 stories high jail. This is how large this place is. But
it's how large your vision is for that place.
And it's how large
an opportunity to reimagine. When we talk about reimagining, the legal system, kind of the reentry process and journey for people, that's just a tremendous example of a place that has caused harm, a place, that has felt like it has snuffed out life and vision and purpose being repurposed in the way that you're talking about it. I think that's just like phenomenal. So you can't retire no time soon.
No time soon.
We can go on vacation and hang out and have more fun. But
there's another jail. It's called Union City that I'm after this one.
Okay, wonderful. And when is your target date again for it to?
We are hoping that this jail closes this year, the end of 2020, and hopefully start a demolition for the new space in 2021. Super.
And how many women are there now again, right now?
In the jail? Mm-hmm. There is only 2 women in the jail right now. It's right today. When I pulled up the jail sheet yesterday, I think it was 20 something people that they arrested. It's not many. When we first started the campaign, at any given night, it was 700 people. But today it's not even over 25 people in the jail.
Wow. Wow. Well, I hope you're doing some good training down there so that in other locations that where people can learn how to close detention centers and repurpose them.
Well, that is the plan, is to try to travel and help and support other states to do the same thing.
Wonderful. And so, Charlotte and Kandra, I'm going to ask you the same question. What is the one thing that you're really, really passionate about right now? And how are you giving back to the community as well as, women? And so I'll go with you, Charlotte.
Thank you for this. For me, again, my passion is the education and training component centered around employment and ban the box. So after that experience with losing my job, what I did was something has to be different for me. So I created a staffing agency for directly impacted or justice involved individuals. And that's what I want to, that's what I'm passionate and working towards, because it's not, because I'm finding down here in Savannah, it's limited careers or employment opportunities available that's not hospitality related. So finding ways to be creative, to encourage justice impacted individuals to look at more career choices, be it a chef, a sous chef, or be it getting with the union. So for me, with Innovative Staffing Solutions, that's my staffing agency, focusing more on the career positions and the potentials to work with individuals to give them careers. We've heard Kandra and Marilyn talk about the difficulties of employment, housing, and things of that nature. How can we expect someone coming out of incarceration to get a $10, $12 job and keep an apartment and to sustain it and to take care of their families? It's unrealistic. So that's what I'm finding is the issue down here in Savannah. So just helping people to readdress their thinking and to let's just do some things differently. So that's where I'm passionate about, just changing the mindset of workforce development and people who hold businesses and positions to employ directly impacted people, and just allowing them to give grace and to afford us the same opportunities that they would someone who's not directly impacted.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Kandra, same question.
It's hard to just pick one.
All right, then do two.
But we're working on a campaign out here in New York State. We do not have expungement laws out here in New York State, right? We have a little stealing law that doesn't really count for most of us because you can only have one charge, right? One conviction. And the vast majority of us that have convictions usually have a lot of them, right? So we're disqualified from any kind of ceiling right off jump. And, with expungement, this is so important. So the Clean Slates campaign that we're running out here in New York City would be automatic expungement, right? And it's definitely a fight. There's, a lot of folks who don't think that every charge should be expunged, right? And so it's constantly educating folks around how hurt people and healed people heal people, and just, really educating people and giving them the facts. There's a lot of misinformation in the world around formerly incarcerated people or what it means to be justice impacted, the way that the penal code classifies a lot of the crimes. It's not often very realistic. There's people on the sex offense registry, for example, that are on there that should not have ever been on there. I work with young people who are on there because of a statutory rape situation, and they're married and have kids with this person and have lived with this person their whole life, and yet they're still on the registry, right? And there's thousands of stories I could tell you about that. And then our other, really passionate that we're doing out here in New York City is the Beyond Rosie's campaign. In order to reach abolition, we got to decarcerate, right, first, and really.
What is Rosie?
The Rose M. Singer Center is the women's facility on Rikers Island. Right now, and we're a city of 7 million people, there's 176 women on Rikers Island right now at the Rose M. Singer Center. So that's kind of why we're constantly talking about they don't need to be there, right? It's the small handful of women. We could easily transition them into a supportive program, into a supportive environment. One thing I'm really eager to do is change our city charter. And rethink what DOC looks like, the Department of Corrections, what that looks like, even maybe just getting rid of them and really thinking more around preventative. And we know that people are going to make mistakes, but how can we then kind of pour love into them and pour opportunities into them and pour support into them so that they don't recidivate, right? That's always the goal. So those are kind of our two, major campaigns that we're kind of focusing on and running, and really look forward seeing all your stuff that you're doing out in ATL, Maryland as well. I follow you, but I want to get into the nitty gritty more.
All right. All right. Yeah. I would love to join y'all, get to off of this call right here, connect.
Yeah. That's why I start off by saying Marilyn is always threatening to retire. She's been threatening, I think, since I met her. And, but what I know is she's so passionate about this work that she will drive anybody crazy in her retirement if she's not probably doing some parts of this work.
I'll be doing something to the day I die.
I know. And I know for me, giving a plug for some of the work that I'm currently doing, it's kind of centered around all of the stuff that we're talking about. I co-founded R3 Score Technologies just when I recognized how the background check, I felt like was one of just the biggest barriers. Yes, it's the box, the application, all of these other things. But so often, if you can get past the application, then it's the background check itself. And then for us, it was just, the background screening process and industry at large was just ripe for disruption. And why not someone who's been impacted by the criminal justice system itself disrupt the space. And so for us, it was a matter of creating a technology, a new tool that could be used as an alternative. Because what we all know on this Facebook Live is that none of us are who we were, and we are not the things that are said about us on paper. And even if those things are true, that's not who you are today. And opportunities that you're applying for today should be assessed by who you are today. And so that is why we launched R3 Score, and we're really excited about the work that we're doing. And what it really takes is all of us. It takes all of us who have been impacted by the criminal justice system to bring our expertise and to attack this very complex, complicated, and convoluted problem from all of the various ways that we can do it. So really just, excited to hear everything that you guys are doing. For us, we share something in common. We all are Just Leadership alums, kind of internal to the organization. We all have this little competitive thing about what year you were formed. And so I'm going to represent 2015, the first year, the inaugural cohort that laid it down to make it possible for the rest of you guys. Just saying. Okay. I know that. I know. And, it's an internal battle. It may mean nothing to anyone else, but, among family, we know what we're talking about. So just really super excited about that. But if we can all take a minute and think of what is a myth about coming in contact with the legal system that we have not already talked about, that if there was one myth that you could dispel or bust, today. Because if you haven't come in contact with the legal system, people are like, oh, we think, before I went to prison, I thought a whole bunch of things. And quite frankly, I didn't know what to think. I entrusted our government to take care of individuals who went to prison until I went to prison. I was like, oh my God, like I would have never understood the system unless I actually went on the inside. So, Marilyn, you look like you're ready to go.
I am. That is the myth that I want to talk about. I want to talk about when you go into the prison system, you go to orientation in the state prison in Georgia. Mm-hmm. You have, I think it's a 6-week orientation where you go through a series of tests to see what your IQ is and, all this stuff, right? But they just take it and fold it away. Then there's a program called Top Step, where they say, we're going to get your license, your birth certificate, your social security card, all of these things when you are released, you will have. And you will go to the Department of Labor to first Top Step, and they will give you a job. That do not happen. That do not happen. I am getting so many, and in myself, I don't even have to talk about the women now. Even now, I went to prison in a 40-year span. And each time I went, I came out with nothing. I came out of Georgia prison with $25. And
you got $25?
That's
you
it.
were $25 richer than me.
That's it. That's the only thing. They don't pay you here. Some people think you get paid in Georgia prisons. You do not get paid. If you're there for 25 years, all you're going to get is $25, a suit of clothes, and a ticket back to the destination that you want to go to. You do not get anything. You don't get a list of housing. You don't get a list of food. You don't get a list of potential employment. You don't get jack, but out the door.
So basically,
and if you're maxing out, you get thrown out.
Yeah. So you are dispelling a lot of myths right there, which is there's no rehabilitation.
No.
Doesn't matter how long you're there,
No.
if you're lucky. And so Marilyn was in state prison, and I'm sure even from state to state will determine whether you get $25 or some other amount or nothing. But it sounds like you got a one-way ticket out, $25. And if you didn't have that made up mind and an ability to go and advocate before a judge, you would have just gone back.
I kept going back until I thought, I'm going to die here just because I need a job. And on that go round, I was just adamant. I'm not going. They kept saying, you got to go. I said, no, I don't got to go. I'm not going. And I didn't go. So here I'm the product now of not going. and make it my own way.
Yeah. Charlotte.
I think is twofold. One, kind of what Marilyn was talking about with the whole reentry process, that in federal, and you probably know this too, Teresa, with federal prison, we had a reentry coordinator, but nothing was done. And we are always told reentry starts the day you enter prison. Well, from the day I entered prison to the day I exited, this reentry coordinator didn't assist me with anything. If it wasn't for people sending me stuff in to help, I don't think I would have gotten it. So the whole reentry initiative and the whole reentry process from the federal prison system is a joke. That's the first thing. And then another thing that I think I've heard, once you do your time, that's it. No, because this is something I relive every single day in every situation of my life, from, serving the prison sentence to having an additional 2 years of federal probation. And those things, the things that come along with the probation sentence, you can't do this, you can't do that. That's a constant. And even still now, fighting for just my rights. Thank God I was able to get my right to vote back, but just a right to do somewhat anything else, like Kandra was talking about, the whole housing issue and things of that nature. Those are things that we have to relive every day. The paying of the fines and the restitution, those collateral consequences that we talk about, me trying to get my license reinstated. So it's no longer, oh, you've done your prison sentence and that's it. No, I'm reliving this every single day of my life. And just that myth of people saying that, it's just like you have no clue from what we have to deal with and what we have to go through just to wake up every day to smile and act like everything is okay from someone who's just as impacted.
Thank you. Kandra?
And for me, definitely the reentry process, like I had said earlier, they tell you inside, oh, you're going to go out, you're going to get this voucher, everything's going to be good. Doesn't work that way. Also, your skills, I always hear a lot, and I even heard this when I was inside, that what we did on the inside is going to translate to the outside world. And that's completely false. As a law clerk, when I was on the inside, I fought to get that position. And when I came home, thinking, oh, okay, I can, I got a job in any law firm. I made a ton of phone calls. Shut on me instantly. They wouldn't even hire me as a receptionist, right? And here I've done all this high level 440 motions, Article 78, all this really high level legal work. And I could not even get a job as a receptionist. I see guys that come home from 20 years upstate working as electricians that come home and cannot get a job as an electrician. So I think also dispelling the information that what we do on the inside is actually recognized on the outside, because that's not how the system is set up, is important. And in New York State, and I just want to say this because I've been on this kick lately, we've been doing a lot of voters registration. And it's funny because we talked at the beginning around the differences between state and federal, but it's also the differences between each state. Because in New York State, I have folks coming home where the parole officers are telling them you can't vote. And in New York State on parole and probation, you can vote, right? And so it's also dispelling that information, because they're giving them myths about, oh, no, you can't vote when you come home. And in New York State, you can. So I think it's different, for each state, but it's really important that we dispel the myths coming from whichever way they're coming.
Got it. No, appreciate that. I think that what we all talked about was, when I was in prison, I felt like their mission statement should be, we are here to bore you to death. Because for me, there, kind of like Charlotte was talking about as well, going in, it was like, oh, yes, there's going to be all this educational opportunity. And there wasn't educational opportunity. The greatest educational opportunity was for women who needed their GED, and even then, often they were taught by other women who were in the facility, who were serving time. When I say in the facility, it's like women who were serving the time. So we were not only the prisoners, we were the educators, in those moments. I think that for me, the biggest myth is that there's not one person who goes to prison. When you think of more than 70 million Americans who have an arrest or conviction record, We are not a monolithic. We're not one person, just even looking at the four of us and talking to us. We are not one person. And so often people are thinking of a solution when the solutions have to be reflective of all of us. And again, it's why I love Just Leadership, because what they do is they bring people together from all around the United States, provide us with this same leadership opportunity. We get to know each other. Quite frankly, I've learned a lot about the legal system just from, not only you guys here today, but just all of the people who are a part of our community as well, because we're all impacting it, often based upon what's important to us and what we feel like is missing. So really excited about that. Before we go further, I do want to invite everyone to continue to follow this conversation at #JustUs, not only now, but in the future, continue to follow this. Just Leadership is having these conversations on a regular and continuous basis, and it's an opportunity for you to learn, because I think one of the things that's really important is market education. What we're doing is we're educating people about, the system. Unless you've been to prison, for those of us who've been to prison, it's like, okay, yeah, whatever. We heard these stories, we've lived these stories. This is our experience. But for people who haven't experienced the prison system, it's you need to hear it. You need to understand how our lives are changed, but not only our lives, the lives of our family, the lives of our community. When we do not allow people to be able to come back and to be contributors, it's society at large that suffers and misses out on. So just, really want to highlight that. Deanna Hoskins, the president and CEO of Just Leadership, wanted to make sure that I thanked all of you guys for participating in this conversation and offering your contributions. And we're getting down to the last 4 minutes. So I want to give each of you kind of like a minute to just share anything that hasn't been shared that you think is important, or to shout out your organizations with your websites or whatever you guys want to do. It's your 1 minute. So Marilyn, I'll let you go first.
Okay. So again, I just want to say thank you for having me. And what I would like to shout out is for people to follow us on closetoJailATL.org, womenontheriseGA.org. And there is a survey that we have, and I would like folks to log on to those websites and complete that survey. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Charlotte.
Thank you, Teresa and Just Leadership, for having us and having this conversation, because it is a well-needed conversation and a continuous thing. For me, you are more than welcome to visit my website, www.innovativestaffingllc.com. Again, I am in Savannah, Georgia, but I am willing and able to help whomever I can if you are just as impacted or directly impacted. Again, working with businesses and organizations who want to work with people coming out of incarceration or people who have background barriers, to integrate them into the workforce and to change it, because this is something, as Teresa mentioned, that needs to take place, because we all suffer as a community when we don't. So, and visit the website and follow us on social media. Thank you.
Super. Thank you. And Kandra.
You can. Just want to thank everyone again for this. I'm really excited to be a part of this, and I've been tuning into a lot of these, and I'm excited to even watch the next one that's coming down the pipe. So thank you again for having me today. You can follow us, Exodus Transitional Community. It's www.etcny.org. And again, I just want to always give a shout out to our org. During COVID-19, we did not close our doors for even a single day, right? It was prior to the pandemic. I had a gentleman come home after serving 45 years, and there was no way that we were just going to have a phone number on a door, because we're a directly impacted organization and it's really personal for all of our staff. So you can check out our website and follow us on social media. Thanks. Super. You.
And we want to send our prayers, our love, our support for those who are serving time right now in prisons or jails, and just to their family members who have to be terrified during this pandemic, not knowing if their loved ones are safe. So often I have sat back selfishly and have been grateful that I wasn't serving time during this pandemic. And what we've seen here is no one is disposable. You know, our world is better because of Charlotte, because of Kandra, because of Marilyn, and because of me, because of our collective contributions, because of Just Leadership, and because of all of the men and women who've served time and have come home and are helping others get back on their feet. So, ladies, thank you for joining us. Just Leadership, thank you for having us. Again, the hashtag to follow this conversation is Just Us. And we're excited and just grateful for the opportunity that you guys have spent this 1 hour learning what it's like to be a woman and incarcerated in the United States. Yes.